You'd think they'd make it easier for people to leave. The dark look her mother and father exchanged didn't go unnoticed. What? Ros asked innocently, but her father shook his head. Eat your supper, then off to bed. Only don't forget, you're not to get changed into a nightie. Put on your bedclothes, just in case we have to leave in a hurry. By bedclothes her father meant day clothes, which they now wore to bed. Ros used her bread to mop up the gravy from her plate. I'm sure they'd understand if we showed them the visa. Like I said, Inga cut her daughter short. They don't care, Ros. They're cruel, heartless, vicious. She held a hand to her forehead. You can't reason with someone who's so full of hate. They're too blind to see. Ros's cheeks flushed. Her mother rarely raised her voice. Samuel placed a hand gently over his wife's, then reached across and placed his other hand over Ros's. A few more days and we'll be gone, and this will all be behind us. He glanced at Ros's plate, which she'd wiped clean. Off to bed, Boobala. Ros kissed her parents goodnight and headed across the hallway to her bedroom, where she quickly washed, then changed from one pinafore dress into another. Bowing her head, she prayed for a peaceful night and for someone to stop the Nazis and their evil ways. Yawning, she climbed between the sheets, never for a moment thinking that she would be woken just a few hours later. Now, with the soldiers banging their fists even harder against the front door, she gave a final look around their stylish townhouse apartment, wondering what would become of the possessions which were too big for them to take. Her father announced that the coast was clear, and she found herself being manoeuvred to one side so that he might lock the door behind them, muttering that this would help to hinder the soldiers' progress. As they stepped out into the night, Ros kept her fingers crossed that they wouldn't be spotted. The last thing they needed was for someone to raise the alarm and alert the soldiers to their movements. Using the cover of the buildings, they made their way to where her father had parked his car a couple of streets away. Looking over his shoulder as he unlocked the doors, Samuel ushered his family inside, whilst he took the crank handle from under the driving seat. He placed it into the slot just below the grille and gave it a few turns, but the engine was cold and didn't want to start. With a look of grim determination, Samuel continued to crank the handle until the engine eventually roared into life. Relieved that they were finally on their way, he took his place behind the wheel. He turned to his wife, who nodded, then his daughter, but as he did so, to his horror, he saw several soldiers running towards them. Assuming that they must have been alerted by his starting the engine, Samuel thrust the car into gear and pulled away from the curb. His mouth went dry as he called out to Ros, who had turned in her seat to watch the soldiers who had doubled their efforts to catch up. But they were no match for a car, and several of them had already given up and turned back. Grinning, Ros made a rather rude gesture at the last soldier before settling back in her seat. "We're free!" she cried, a relieved smile spreading across her face. "Not yet, we aren't," hissed Inga. "We'll not be free until we are on that ferry." "They'll not catch us now," Ros said confidently. "Not on foot." Inga arched her beautifully shaped eyebrows. "Do you not think they also have cars?" Fear flooded Ros. Of course they had cars, and what's more, she had just made the sort of gesture which would shock her parents, and probably cause the soldier to be more determined than ever to catch them. She looked over her shoulder, but it was impossible to see anything in such darkness. She turned back to stare out of the windscreen. "Where will we go? We're too early for a train." Her mother turned to face Ros, a reassuring smile on her lips. "We can park near the station. Your father scouted the area the other day, and he found a wonderful spot where we can sit nestled behind some trees, out of sight from prying eyes. We should be safe there until the train arrives." Ros relaxed a little. "What about the car?" Her father shrugged. "I'm sure they'll discover it sooner or later, but we'll be long gone by then, and there won't be anything they can do about it."